Isaac Wilson is returning to Utah, and it's still one of the most shocking developments to recently happen in the university's history. What does it mean? Also, why are so many Utah players in the portal? Does that speak to a bigger issue with the program, especially when you have one of your projected starters choosing BYU? We're talking about that and more on today's Locked On Utes and Locked On Big 12 crossover.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes and Locked On Big 12 your first listen every single day. We are available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And if it's your first time listening, as Drake loves to say, if you guys subscribe, we get to keep our job, so make sure you guys subscribe as well. And today's episode of Locked On Utes and Locked On Big 12 is brought to you by the College Football Playoff. That's right, the College Football Playoff is here, and you don't want to miss a moment of the action. The College Football Playoff is presented by Allstate. Begins with the four first-round games, December 20th and the 21st. It's on ESPN, ABC, TNT, and even streaming on Max. So make sure you guys check out the College Football Playoffs today. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined by Drake Toll for this episode. And Drake, I'm still shocked that Isaac Wilson is coming back. This is something that I don't think anyone of us expected, but he's back. I still think I'm good with it because long-term, I think he has potential. He's not going to start over Dampier. He honestly should maybe, I don't even know if he should see the field next year. It's a long-term upside bet. I think it's a good decision for Utah and Wilson, but I'm still shocked.
Yeah, this is some of the biggest portal news to come out of the Big 12 so far this offseason. And I think what it sends, the message it sends to everybody in the Big 12 is your favorite player or your least favorite player, that kid in the portal from your team could come back. There's always a possibility you're going to see a kid return to Utah, to Texas Tech, to Baylor, to BYU, to any of these schools. And that's the case here. What's surprising to me is it felt like when he entered the portal, it was almost a shoo-in that BYU was the choice. He's this legacy player. He could give the big middle finger to Utah, where a lot of fans and even media have speculated that he was mistreated or put in bad positions, that the offensive coordinator was fired midseason. So that's a tough draw for the kid. And instead of all of this petty, all right, he's going to go to BYU. This was obvious, kind of the take that I had 2 weeks ago of course this would happen. Now he's staying at Utah, and he's at least going to compete for the starting. He's not going to win the starting job, but at the very least, he'll create competition. And we saw it at Baylor this last year. I brought this up a bit. DeQuan Finn comes in as their big NIL piece. He's going to be the starting quarterback for the Bears, and then he stinks. So Sawyer Robertson, he effectively built by competition over the course of the last couple off seasons, steps into the role as Baylor's quarterback and succeeds. So for Isaac Wilson or anybody else who comes into the transfer portal for Utah who is still trying to figure out how to replace the pushing 20 guys that have gotten in, and I think Dampier's probably your guy here with his OC being in town, at least competition will be there. So if Dampier doesn't work out, the kid moving up an entire basically division of football to move into the Big 12 and play for Utah, who should be a Big 12 title contender, if he doesn't work out, now Isaac Wilson has been pushed in the offseason as, hey, if we need you, you're going to have to rise to the occasion, when he really didn't do it last season.
You just say Utah may be a Big 12 contender?
I don't see how they couldn't be. And the reason I do say that, I think a lot of people will push back on it, is the same reason that Oklahoma State can't be taken completely out of the conversation here. You have a coach with longevity who has won at a very high level and won at a conference championship level. Oklahoma State was in the Big 12 title 2 years ago. Utah won back-to-back Pac-12 championships with a good portion of guys that are still on the roster today. Now, the transfer situation is not good, and we will get there later on in this show. However, I don't believe that at this time we can say that Utah's season next year is a wash. Kyle Whittingham wouldn't come back for nothing, and he's built a culture enough that I believe Utah should still be in that conversation. Should Cincinnati? No, you got a lot to prove. Should Arizona? Absolutely not. You got a lot to prove. Should UCF? No, not yet. But Utah, their head coach, he's a statue guy. When a statue guy is leading your team, you've got to give that squad some respect. And this is a point that Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On College Football makes a lot, is that it's one that I've had to learn. One quarterback could have made a huge difference for Utah last year, same as it did for Dylan Gabriel and Oklahoma. When Gabriel was at Oklahoma, they were a very good football team. And since he's been gone, they stink. And that was a major piece. If you've got a healthy quarterback, a strong quarterback at Utah, things should have gone a lot different this last season, offensively, obviously. And if that's the case next year, whether it's Wilson or Dampier, I do believe that Utah's at least got a shot.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at how they lost the 7 of their final 8 games. Every single one of them was a game in the fourth quarter at one point, and so often they lost those games. The main reason being poor quarterback play. You bring in Dampier, who led the 4th best offense in college football, reuniting him with his offensive coordinator. That should at least lead to improved quarterback play. Yeah. Also, Drake, I appreciate you giving the Utes some love too. That's I think hearing you say that, I think is going to be tough for the crowd that says you're just out against Utah too. So I think I appreciate you adding that as well. And I want to also just say you always do a good job of. I think you just keep it real. So that's why I always enjoy having you on. I think you do a good job. And because you always keep it real, I want to ask you this next. So I still believe in Isaac Wilson's future potential. We have seen so often. Caleb Lomu, Utah's left tackle, was really good this last year. He didn't even play as a freshman. As a sophomore, steps up at left tackle, was really good. Spencer Fano, year 1 to year 2 leap was massive. We see big freshman to sophomore leaps all the time. That's why I still believe that Isaac Wilson can eventually be a good starting quarterback at the P4 level. How do you view Wilson's future?
I do think he can be a legit quarterback at the Power 4 level. My question is for Wilson, and based on Dampier and what he has left of his college career, will it be next season? Will it be 2 seasons for now? Like when will Isaac Wilson get another shot? And what's so interesting, we seldom get the optic of kid plays for a year, his freshman year, and then sits for 2 more. Then you see him again. It's almost this like Alan Bowman treatment where we saw him play a college career effectively. He goes to Michigan for 2 years. You never hear from him, and then bam, he's a starting quarterback at Oklahoma State. Yeah. And so for Isaac Wilson, will we look up in 2026, 2027 and go, oh, shoot, Isaac Wilson's back on the field? Yep. And will it be for Utah? I think if I had to decide today, I'm just not sure, JT, if Utah will actually be the long-term choice for Isaac Wilson. And that's the same thing. Let me break this down for Utah fans that'll freak out over that comment. It's the same thing as saying that Utah football will win a Big 12 championship if Cam Rising stays healthy. There's always going to be that if when it comes to injuries and portal. You can say with any player, I don't know if they're going to finish their career here. That applies to every guy in the roster, but I think it applies doubly to any quarterback in the country, and a quarterback who I felt like was slighted a bit in the situations he was placed in for Utah this season. Hey, go to Brandon Rose. We saw him play pretty well. Go to the Italian Stallion. We saw him play decently at the very least and win a football game for Utah, but instead they threw Isaac Wilson out there and said, go, swim, and he was drowning the entire year. So will he stick around long-term? I don't think he's inked that deal yet. I don't think we can confirm Isaac Wilson will be in town for a long time, but at the very least, one of the best high school quarterbacks to ever come out of Utah, the legacy brother who's an NFL player. He's got potential, and that potential could carry him into a solid spot in his career in college football, I believe.
It could. With Dampier, you're right. He's only a sophomore. So he's got junior. I like Devin Dampier. I don't see a world where he balls out so much that, I'm declaring for the NFL. Is there a world where Utah just lost one of their corners, Cameron Calhoun, was really good? We can talk about him in a little bit, but that's a guy who played so well. It seems like he priced himself out of Utah's NIL range. Could that happen with Dampier? Sure. But I mean, outside of that, I don't see him leaving. So that's where, does Wilson really want to stick around 2 years? I don't think so. And Drake, to your point too about, saying a guy, like, I know Utah fans don't want to hear this, but a guy could leave. There's a transfer portal. Any guy could leave. We're seeing that everywhere right now. Utah, back in their 2023 recruiting class, they brought in 3 4-star running backs. Only one of them is still on the roster, and one of them they tried to turn into a corner this last year too. So you can never say never in the transfer portal era. And I mentioned a couple of those guys already that are in the portal. Why are so many players in the portal for Utah? The actual number is alarming, especially when you look at how many portal entries it is compared to other college football programs. That's what we're going to be talking about next on this Locked On Utes, Locked On Big 12 crossover. But first, our crossover episode is brought to you by our great friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel has you covered, and one thing we cannot wait this weekend are the college football playoff. But not even just the college football playoff on Saturday, still got NFL action. You can get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com today to join. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And speaking of the NFL, we got some Christmas Day games coming up next week. I already mentioned some of the Saturday slate of football. The race for the 1 seed is heating up. How are the Lions going to fare over the last few weeks? They're really banged up right now. I'm a Vikings fan, so I'm hoping my Vikings can get in the race a little bit more. How about on the AFC side with Mahomes missing time potentially now too? How is it all going to shake out? Head over to FanDuel. It's not just the NFL, it's the NBA, MLB, NHL, college football, college basketball, you name it. FanDuel has you covered. Head over to America's #1 sportsbook today. And also want to talk to you all about another one of our sponsors of today's crossover episode. It's our great friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is here for you because with Prize Picks, it's the easy and best way to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. And with Prize Picks, you can make your holidays bigger and brighter with Prize Picks. This is the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks, and Prize Picks is the best way to get on the action in more than 30 states, including California, Texas, Georgia, and Florida. Prize Picks now offers MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Join now because this holiday season, Prize Picks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas. Sign up today and get that $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. And it's so easy. I mean, if you think about how you want to play, it's just like, hey, will James Cook get more than 60 yards this week? Or how about Joe Burrow, more than 1.5 passing touchdowns? Cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run the game on Prize Picks. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONCollege. It's all caps, no spaces, to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Once again, you can download that app today and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game today. The transfer portal, Drake, is always crazy for everyone. So how crazy has it been for Utah? Really wild. There's actually been almost an alarming amount of Utah players in the portal. Now, as early as a few days ago, ESPN published an article talking about how many players amongst Power 4 teams have entered the portal. Utah has had the 8th most, up to 18. Wilson coming back will drop that down to 17. But honestly, by the time you guys are listening to this, and we're recording it just a day before, there could be even more players that enter the portal. So it's always changing. It's always crazy. Is this alarming for Utah? To me, it's not too much because there's only about 3 or 4 of those that I look at as tough losses, and 1 or 2 even in that like 4, I would say that's a big loss. But the fact that it's 18 is still a lot, obviously.
Yeah, this is usually what I would say when you lose 6, 7 guys. It's great. Good for your program. Positive attrition. There are dudes that are leaving that probably need to go elsewhere and aren't going to be contributors for you, or they could be, some sort of locker room cancer. And for Utah, you look at Sam Heward, who on paper is one of the best players to ever step foot on campus at Utah, being a 5-star out of high school. Right. Very much so on paper, right? He's looking for his 4th school, I think it is now. So you got to really sift through who these guys are and why, but like in his case, right? Oh, no, a 5-star player is leaving you. Okay, buddy. He's a Korean transfer portal player. So I don't think the sky is necessarily falling for Utah, but from Dejon Stanley to Jalen Glover to, there are a couple of guys you're like, oh, she took the damn punter. You're like, I mean, I've seen these names before. These guys have played football for the Utes. Yep. And I got out to 2 different Utah football games this last year, and you look at the quarterback room, it's decimated at this point too. Carson Ryan leaving and going to BYU. There is some room for concern here when you look at your offensive coordinator got fired midseason, your head coach, you didn't know if he was going to be back. Now he is back. And what is his outlook for next year when nearly 20 guys have entered the transfer portal for Utah? At the very least, you got to go, that's not great. Like there is some positive attrition there, but gosh, you just wish you could have developed a couple more of those players. If it was 10, I'd be saying, all right, cool, you're fine, positive attrition, whatnot. But 20, almost 20, there are a couple of guys in there that Utah could have used next season. And at that point, Kyle Whittingham, hey, old dog, new trick. You have to go in the transfer portal and make absolute waves. And at this point, at the time of recording, Utah has not landed a 4-star in the portal. I do think Dampier is a big pickup. You've gotten guys from A&M, Oregon, Mississippi State, some Big Ten, some SEC additions for the Utes. That trend has to continue if you want to compete in the Big 12. Colorado brought in 43 players last offseason. You don't have to do that, but Utah is going to have to hit the portal hard. And for what you lost, you need to gain to compete next year when Colorado is in this conference, and they're going to continue to outpace you in the portal if you don't step it up. Utah is going to have to do that. It's not red button time yet, but it's not a great thing.
Yeah, it's not a great thing. I mean, but even Drake, you just said in the last segment, right, that you still expect this team to be a Big 12 title contender. So we're still feeling good enough about the pieces that were in place. You mentioned, look, the quarterbacks, all of them leaving, and I know Wilson's now back, is not a great sign, but honestly, it's an overall indictment on the previous offensive staff that failed. I mean, they really did. And yes, I know Brandon Rose had a nice quarter and moment against BYU, but also the week before that, he threw an interception that lost him the game against Houston. I'm not trying to dump on him. I'm just stating fact.
JT, yeah. I do think we have to at some point. Like I pointed the Baylor situation I mentioned a couple times where they bring in DeQuan Finn, they unload the Brink truck to get him there in IL, and then he stinks. I pointed a coach somewhere here and say, okay, who made that call as the talent evaluator? I pointed Kyle Whittingham and say, Andy Ludwig was a top 5 highest paid assistant in the country. And that was your guy. That was your decision to give him that amount of money. What kind of coach evaluator was Kyle Whittingham in the last couple of seasons? What went wrong with the Ludwig situation? And now I think you are seeing so many transfers because the offense was a complete dumpster fire. The coordinator hire is great, but you're reaping what you sowed with paying Andy Ludwig that kind of money, then having to fire him midseason. I think, JT, we've got to look at Kyle Whittingham and say, hey, if there's anybody at fault here, it's not just, tumultuous offensive situation because of Ludwig. No, there was one guy who was keeping Ludwig in town and paying him a whole lot of money. It's Kyle Whittingham. And I do think that's something to also keep in mind.
I agree with that. The only thing I'll say is I think Andy Ludwig, we have to give him credit for what he did with Cam Rising. Now, Andy Ludwig's indictment is that he was just bad at developing quarterbacks. That's a fact. It didn't go well. And the fact that he had a good relationship with Cam Rising and Cam Rising's play himself masked that issue. So that's where I'll give Ludwig credit. But look, when you can't develop the other guys, that's where the wheels ended up falling off, and it hurt Ludwig. So we talked about a lot of the guys that Utah entered the portal. Some of them developmental guys you hoped would have worked out. Other ones, starters that'll leave. The Cameron Calhoun one hurts, but that's just, it seems, like we said, NIL related. But the one that Drake I look at and I'm like, oh, like that one stings more than anyone else. Not as much as the loss of the player himself, but where he chose to go. Utah tight end Carson Ryan, who I looked at as the probable starting tight end. And they got Landon King back. Landon King's really good too. But Carson Ryan chose to leave Utah and go to BYU. And to me, that is a concerning thing when you choose to leave one school and go to the direct rival.
Yeah, it's the number 2 tight end in the country per 24/7 Sports, and that's a tough thing to lose for BYU.
He was the number 2 tight end. Wow. I don't know. And I know he had 200 back at UCLA. He did not even cross 150 yards last year, I didn't think.
And a lot of, you look at 24/7, a lot of this is based off their high school as well and previous, and all kind of their algorithm is out of whack at times. But yeah, Carson Ryan, but like you said, he was going to be the starting tight end. So it's not shocking that he's high rated as a tight end coming out of Utah, and he's coming out of tight end U. This is, if you want to go be developed in that position as a tight end, Utah has been the place to do it and has pumped out NFL caliber guys. Brant Keithy most recently, who I think was the best tight end in the country, at least in the Big 12, could have been in the country if not for injury. And for him to leave and then leave to go to BYU is like, okay, shoot. There's a probable starter who's gone to your rival. I thought Isaac Wilson would do the same thing. Obviously, he didn't. And that's the kind of guy you point to in the portal and you go, are the wheels falling off? You start to ask the question when a guy like that goes to your rival as your rival is poaching, hunting for tight ends. But to push back on that point, when you start to ask, oh, is this the downtrend? Is this the beginning of the end? Is Kyle Whittingham really losing it? Is the portal going to crush us? Go back to 2012, 5-7 Utah. They were already in the Pac-12 in 2011 and gone 8-5. They had showed success in that conference. Then immediately followed up with 5-7. All right, hey, everybody calm down, statue coach. 5-7 again. Has he lost it? Have the wheels fallen off? Is Utah done? And then after that, 9-4, 10-3, 9-4. He's Kyle Whittingham. That's why we can't doubt Utah next season. The dude has done it before. He's going to keep doing it. What does he do? He wins. So we all got to calm down a bit.
He does win, and that's where, as much as I'm excited about the future of Morgan Scalley and Drake, I definitely think there is a world where a year from now we are talking about it was a mistake for Kyle Whittingham to come back, because there was obviously program problems with the things that went wrong with Utah, overall organizational. But still trust Kyle Whittingham's body of work, as you mentioned. Think he's the right guy to lead this team. And overall, there have not been too many alarming transfers. The number is, you don't love the number, but when you change and get a new offensive staff with how bad Utah's offense was, it's going to be understandable. You get a lot. So curious to see what Utah does the rest of the transfer portal season. And obviously every move that Utah makes is to eventually try and get back to the college football playoff. That's what we want to talk about, not just the current college football playoff, but especially if it'd be good for not just Utah, but all of the Big 12 to expand the CFP to more teams. We're going to be discussing that possibility in one moment. But first, before we talk about the future of the college football playoff, why would we do that when we can talk about how great the present is looking? Because today's episode of Locked On Utes is also brought to you by the college football playoff. It's that time of year. The college football playoff is back. And with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports' coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup, the SMU Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. That's right. You can stream it on Max as well. College football playoff is going to be live on TNT at 11 a.m. on Saturday, and then against Clemson and Texas on Saturday as well later on. TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. You don't want to miss a moment of the action. Check out the college football playoff this weekend. All right, Drake, we were just talking about the college football playoff. So look, Big 12 only got one team in. More than likely, year in and year out, they will only get one team in. So I want to ask you, do you think it'd be good overall if the college football playoff expanded and we could get at least one more Big 12 team in?
Here's what's dangerous is the SEC wants to restructure the college football playoff. And honestly, it sounds like they want to allow more teams in, specifically themselves. Why not 4 or 5 automatic bids for the SEC? And I know that Greg Sankey, somewhere in the back of his psyche, is not excited by the prospect of having to play more Big 12 schools. Here's an example of that. Is he's not asking for 16 or 24 teams. He's asking for more auto bids for the SEC. He wants his conference to have more opportunity and the Big 12 not be there. The reason why is because if BYU gets in, and this season, if BYU gets in and Ole Miss gets in, and then BYU goes and beats Ole Miss, it ruins the entire SEC agenda they're pushing. Whereas if in an automatic bid scenario, Ole Miss gets in, the Big 12 is left out, BYU, Iowa State, Colorado, one of those schools, and we never get that hypothetical matchup and Ole Miss marches wherever they march, then Greg Sankey can say, oh, well, Ole Miss was always the best. What you avoid is some really good Big 12 competition by the SEC getting more auto bids and keeping the Big 12 out. However, if we were to go to a 16 team, a 24 team, I mean, look at this. Mike Leach talked about it all the time. We said, oh, it's crazy Uncle Mike Leach. High school football, 24 teams, 32 teams. In Texas, it is 64 teams. And you have the opportunity after you break it down. So we're in regionality. Most of these conferences still, you have this sort of, okay, well, this is your Northern Conference. And now we're spreading it across America. Well, we'll break it down to the winner of this conference in the same way the AFC East gets their champion into the playoffs. We'll break it down to where your conference champion is going to get in. And the more teams have an opportunity, the less controversy there is. If there are 24 teams, the FCS has done this to great success. They bring in more money off of that tournament than any other aspect of their football season. The Big 12 could do the college football FBS level could do the exact same thing. The playoff could do the same thing. Why not give a BYU or in an on year a Utah or in an on year a Baylor or a Texas Tech or an Oklahoma State the opportunity to play for a national championship? Because I do believe as long as the committee is full of fallible people who want the SEC to succeed, the Big 12 won't get opportunities. And the only way that we can prove that we can win at the highest level is to have an opportunity in an expanded playoff. Because as we know right now, they'll do everything they can to keep us out.
You make fantastic points, especially the latter parts about the reasons to expand. But I'm going to talk about why I actually hope they keep it at 12, and it's for something you brought up right off the bat. You went exactly where I wanted to go. It's the SEC bias. It drives me absolutely insane. Drake, when's the last time anyone on national TV, and I like the people on national TV, I really do. When's the last time anyone brought up the fact that Arkansas lost a game to Oklahoma State, the worst team in the Big 12? Like, that never gets brought up. And who did Arkansas beat? Tennessee. Oh, all the time I hear about how South Carolina would demolish SMU. Well, SMU played Clemson really close, and just the week before, Clemson didn't give up the lead until like the final minute against South Carolina. But sure, SMU's not in the same class as South Carolina, just because it means more in the SEC. It drives me insane. I actually think what the College Football Playoff Committee did this year by putting in SMU over Alabama gives me the hope that the Big 12 can get multiple teams, and not even just two. I think there is a world, it's unlikely, but a world where the Big 12 could even get 3 teams in. Now, it obviously requires all these teams to go basically 11-1, and maybe that second loss in the conference championship game, but that world exists. And the more we expand, if you do 16, I just think it's going to be SEC heavy. I mean, if they expanded to 16, Drake, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if another Big 12 team would have gotten in, right?
Right, and they certainly should have. BYU was near that threshold, Iowa State as well. And they talked about not punishing teams who lost their conference championship. I mean, you're in that area. And this opens up a larger conversation, because I do agree that 12 is the right number. Do we go back to a computer? How do we factor in who decides the college football playoff teams? Because I mean, I know Utah fans don't want to hear it, but BYU was 10-2. They beat SMU at SMU's house. There's an argument there that games now don't matter if they were played in September. Oh, it's a different team. It's different. Well, then why play those games in September? Just go play Wofford. Go play somebody like that. So if you're a Big 12 school, you're right. 11-1 is the goal, and it really doesn't matter who you beat to get to that 11-1. Because as we've seen, the best wins the Big 12 got from Oklahoma State against Arkansas or BYU against SMU just don't really matter. Nobody talks about it in the end. So play who you want. The SEC does. They're going to play Mercer or UAB in one of these last weeks of the football season. And so the Big 12 should replicate that kind of schedule, because strength of schedule is not taken into account in the way that it probably should be. And until we have some sort of criteria that's set, I don't know what to do. Do you want strength of schedule? Do you want wins? What do we need to do? This is Brett Yormark's question to the College Football Playoff Committee. What do we need to do from a scheduling standpoint to make sure that the maximum amount of Big 12 teams, the most Big 12 teams, could get the big dance? And until there's an answer to that question, this whole thing's going to be a mess.
It's going to be a mess. And even in what you're talking about, there's so many complicated aspects of that, because yes, games in September don't always seem to matter, but also, and this is different because Group of 5, if Boise didn't play Oregon, and I know they lost the game, they wouldn't be a top 4 seed. And also, if Clemson had beaten Georgia, and I know it's a big if, and they didn't look like they belonged, so that hurt them a while, but that's the gamble of, if you play a team like that, if you prove you belong with an SEC team, like you beat a Georgia or someone like that, I do think that could be a boost as well if some Big 12 teams were to schedule that. But then you're also just risk catering to the SEC, because we know they're probably not going to leave the South in terms of trying to play a road game very far at a better neutral site. As far neutral as they go is AT&T Stadium. So that's also where it gets complicated, Drake. And you make a good point in computers too. And I've usually been against computers, but if I keep having to listen to what the reason that South Carolina should be in the playoff is what the FanDuel line would be against SMU, and I love our friends at FanDuel, but if like that's the justification, we're taking away the value of like, hey, they gave themselves an opportunity to be on this field. They deserve this opportunity to see what they can do. And that's where it's really sad that the sport is heading in that direction, where we're just like, just because they're in the SEC, they'd be better. When Ole Miss lost to Kentucky, and Kentucky's only FBS win was against Ole Miss. So it drives me nuts.
Yeah. I am. You lost to Vanderbilt. You lost to Oklahoma. We're just going to keep complaining. You lost to Kentucky. We're just going to keep complaining for teams that lost games. And so, to me, JT, it is very obvious that the Big 12 needs a more fair shake, and the SEC is going to continue to tout itself, no matter what, as the best conference in college football. And my question that I really got down to in the last couple of weeks is strength of schedule. Who decides that? If you're all just kind of playing each other and your non-conference really wasn't that powerful, who gets to decide, you know what, because of this preseason ranking that was completely false, you get a ranked win, and this helps your strength of schedule, and the SEC is the best conference. Okay, well, if they're only really playing each other and their non-conference is pretty much cheese, then how are they going to get a strength of schedule boost? There are so many factors here that point toward other conferences, not named the Big 12, getting an unfair nod from the College Football Playoff Committee, and you're right, it's got to change.
I agree with that, especially when we have teams like everyone was going crazy over LSU. LSU lost to a very middle of the road USC team, but no one talked about that. And that goes back to your point you talked about games in September. So it's a big issue. Fascinating to see how the future of the sport continues to change and evolve, not just in the transfer portal, but in the college football playoff, in the NIL era. There's a lot to unpack. And Drake, you guys can make sure you guys keep it at Locked On Big 12 to see everything that Drake does a great job covering everything that's going on. Make sure you keep it at Locked On Utes too. Drake, always fun doing these with you, my friend.
JT, absolute pleasure.
That'll do it for today's Locked On Utes, Locked On Big 12 crossover. We'll be back with you soon talking all the latest in the college football world.